What are the biggest changes from the 2024 Titans to the 2025 Titans? Now that the offseason program is wrapped up, we can look back and assess everything different and why the Titans should be much better in 2025. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville. Alongside 440 Sports, I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo. And Justin, we're back for another long-form, traditional Music City Audible podcast. It's nice to be back on the mic with you.
Agreed. Yeah, we took I don't want to call it a break because we put out two videos this week prior to this one. One was a theory you had on a Cam Ward interception we'll get into a little bit later. And another was the intricate details of the contract situation between Femi Oladejo, the second-round pick, and the Tennessee Titans. But today, more traditional, long-form, 30, 40 minutes, as you said. Excited to cover what I think in the intro. I don't want to say you sold it short, but this is gonna be a deep dive into some of the changes, analytically the Titans are making. This isn't going to be they've got a new quarterback. No, this is some of the philosophical changes that make the Titans really different. Playbook changes, in-depth personnel changes, some really interesting things said over the last couple of days, and we've put together, I think, what's a really good episode here.
Not just the last couple of days. I got a quote that we're going to play here from May 28th. So this is going back, almost a month here as we talk about the biggest changes. And obviously, as you mentioned, the biggest change is at the quarterback position. And while we may have become the unofficial Cam Ward podcast here for a large part of the draft process and afterwards, we're not going to touch too much on Cam Ward because, as you said, that is a hugely obvious one. We all know that bringing in a quarterback can change everything about an organization from, the way that how hard the players play because they believe they have a real chance to do something from just how good your team can be if you have, higher level quarterback play. So we're going to avoid that part of the conversation. Just know that that is obviously one of the biggest changes. But really what we're going to talk through here is, like you said, some philosophical changes. We are going to quickly run through some roster and staff changes that are, I think, notable, at least to discuss as we get into why the philosophy has changed and what this can mean for the Titans and why we think they should be a better team in 2025. But let's start with some news, Justin, because this was some cool news that came down. Cam Ward is going to be starring, I don't want to say starring in, he's going to be the subject of a new documentary series called Zero Star, the Cam Ward story, that will be airing on Tubi, of all places, in September of this year. It's a 6-part miniseries. I'm sure everyone watching and listening to this has seen the news about it. Pretty cool look for Titans fans at Cam Ward as he went through the process of, going off to Incarnate Word, transferring to Washington State, finally to Miami, and working his way all the way up to the number 1 pick after starting as a 0-star recruit out of high school. I will say, I think this story has been really, really well covered, not just by Titans media, by national media, but also by Titans media. I did a whole video, the Air McNair video, talking about Cam Ward's background and comparing it to Steve McNair. I think this subject has been discussed very, very in depth, but it will be really cool to see it produced at a high level with access to Cam's coaches and family and teammates and himself and talking through what this was like for him. So I'm super excited for this series to come out.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch it. His story and journey's incredibly unique. Not every day a 0-star recruit ends up being the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. So I think it's a worthwhile story. It's one worth telling on the big screen, if you will. And I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah, I'm super excited to watch it. It's Firebrand Media Group is the production company behind it. So Tubi didn't produce this. They went and acquired the rights to it, right, which I think speaks to maybe some higher level, like some bidding behind the scenes that may have been going on for the rights to this documentary series. And Tubi obviously trying to put themselves more on the map, a free service, which I think is great. My only complaint with this entire series, and I think I saw Easton Freeze tweet this as well, is that it's coming out in September. And I quickly want to address the Buck Rising Jared Stillman side of this take, which is that Cam Ward has to earn the right to do any type of media before he goes off and makes a documentary or whatever. They're talking, Buck and Jared Stillman have talked about how Cam Ward needs to earn this right and that Will Levis's Mayo commercials are in some way related to
apples and oranges.
An independent media company seeking out a story and wanting to tell it versus Will Levis and his representatives seeking out sponsorship because of some goofy viral videos that he made. They are in completely different stratospheres. The Will Levis thing was you're selling your brand and your name and image and likeness to a company to go be a star of a mayonnaise commercial that airs on Sundays is a lot different than a documentary company coming to you and saying, we want to tell your story. So first off, let's get that out of the way. But secondly, my only real issue with this docu-series is that it's coming out in September. And if the Titans start the season bad and this thing rolls out, I don't know how they're going to roll it out. Maybe they drop all 6 episodes over 6 days. But if they drop it 1 episode a week starting in September, if the Titans start 1-5, by episode 6, we're going to be like, fuck the Cam Ward story. Why do the Titans suck again?
I mean, I think they'll manage to avoid that. I don't know how Tubi works, but things like this usually drop all at once. I think dropping it all at once in early September makes sense. You know, that's when Titans fans are back in the saddle, grind, excited for the season. I think they'll probably capture a lot of viewership by dropping it in early September.
I think it would be really cool to have it now, though, just because we have now, 5 weeks of nothing before training camp
Too dead of a time
starts.
for the casual fan, though. That's not good enough, I think, from a marketing perspective.
I guess that makes sense. I do wonder, Justin, do you think they'll document him admitting to throwing practice interceptions on purpose?
Guys, hear me out. So a couple days ago, Graver hits me with this theory that maybe Cam Ward threw that practice interception on purpose to Cody Barton because Cody Barton's on the same offseason team as him, and it gained them points in this competition that Brian Callahan invented. I told him he was batshit crazy, and it was one of the worst ideas I've ever heard. So naturally, he said, well, I'm going to go ahead and make a video on it and put it on the podcast. And I said, I think you're going to get absolutely flamed in the comments. Fast forward to today. The video's got about 4,500 views on the YouTube channel here. Most people in the comments, like in jest, thought it was funny and a good theory. Only a couple people called him nuts like I did. I thought there was going to be way more people who thought he was crazy. One guy said, I think seek mental help. I thought that was hilarious. One guy said, you've gained entrance into the psych ward. I thought that made sense. It was hilarious. You guys tend to enjoy that content. I thought it was a batshit crazy idea. I'm glad he did it. 4,500 views for the channel. Most of you found it entertaining and got a good kick out of it. I thought there was no chance in hell he threw that interception on purpose, but I'm glad people appreciated your batshit crazy detective work.
You thought that, and then you watched the video, and you were like, you know what? He actually laid out a really good case. I still don't believe it.
I still think that there's no chance that he threw that interception on purpose. But you're like that little nephew, who says something, and the adult pretends to pay attention. Yeah, pretends to pay attention. That's how I reacted to the video. I hope that's how everyone who left a comment reacted. But apparently, a lot of people were on board with this crazy theory.
I would like to just clarify, I don't necessarily believe it 100%. I'm more in the realm of I wouldn't be surprised if it was true. But I will also say, and I won't reveal our source, but somebody who was at Titans practice told us, both of us, that there were discussions amongst other members of Titans media about maybe he might have thrown it on purpose. Not that anyone confirmed or anything, but that they also kind of wondered, do you think he actually did that for the offseason competition points? Anyway, I feel like I laid out the case really well. It's only an 8.5-minute video, so if you have time and you haven't seen it, go back and find it in the feed. I think it's a really fun watch, as you said, Melo, and maybe true, probably not true. We also did another, as you mentioned, short video on the Femi Oladejo thing, and I feel like Femi Oladejo hasn't signed his contract. It's probably not the most enticing story, and I can understand why, if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you didn't click on that one. But I think the underlying story there is really fascinating about how only 2 out of 32 second-round picks have actually signed their rookie contracts yet, and we discussed why. So if you haven't seen that one either, it's only 10 minutes. Go back in the feed and watch that one too. We've been doing these little mini pods this week, and I think it's something we're going to try out, and if you guys like it, we're going to keep doing them as a way to just have more content, because we're not going to probably get to a point where we're doing 5 episodes like this a week. Justin and I simply are too busy with our full-time jobs, but we can do little mini-sodes like that. If you guys like them, let us know in the comments and we'll keep doing it. And while I've got you here, a reminder to subscribe to the channel. Justin, congratulations to us. We passed 4,000 subscribers. Huge achievement that means absolutely nothing in the long run, but huge achievement for us. We were shooting for it. Now we got to get to 5,000. So everyone that helped us get to 4,000, we really appreciate you. You actually can't help us get to 5,000 because you're already subscribed, but everyone else out there.
Tell a friend.
Yeah, tell a friend, and everyone else out there who hasn't subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like the video, drop a comment below. All right, Justin, let's get into the changes here as we discussed at the top of the show. Everything different from the 2025 Titans to the 2024 Titans. And we're going to start with the staff. I think we can roll through this part fairly quickly because it's obvious everyone knows that the Titans have a new general manager in Mike Borgonzi. That is one of the biggest changes outside of the quarterback position here. And Mike Borgonzi has made a lot of behind-the-scenes changes to his scouting staff and the personnel department there. We don't really know all the specifics of it, and if we did, it wouldn't really matter to us because we don't know who these guys are. But we know that there are new philosophies in place when it comes to scouting players. We saw some of this take shape during the free agency process, during the draft, where they targeted guys in free agency who were durable, who had played a lot of games, who had leadership qualities. In the draft, we saw them target guys who, and we saw this in the Titans of Tennessee video that the Titans team put out on YouTube about how, Chad Brinker said in that video, you guys are going to be able to guess who we're going to draft going, in future years because you're going to have such an understanding of what we mean when we say play like a Titan.
Big, fast, tough football players who love winning more than anything else. I mean, that's a Titan. I really want, I think over time, as you see how this unfolds, you might be able to draft them for us ahead of time because you're going to see that looks like a Titan.
So tough guys who love football, who have those leadership qualities. We're seeing those philosophical changes in the scouting department, and that's where we're going to start here, although we're not going to spend too much time on it.
No, and look, the GM also brought in, Dave Ziegler, Reggie McKenzie, a couple former GMs that he surrounded himself with, guys he knows, from different stops. So that's the one thing I think we'll say about that. And you saw some of the emphasis, like at wide receiver. You talked about big, tough, all the cliches. But one of the ones that everyone wants big, tough players, durable players, right? But one thing that really struck me this year that really felt different was adding speed to the wide receiver room, right? Like Shimere DK running a 4.34 at the NFL Combine. Alec Iomanner running a very good time for his size as well. Van Jefferson's obviously far removed, but running in the 4.3s when he went to the NFL Combine. James Prochet, speed and playmaking ability on special teams. So that was one that really struck out to me, was an element of speed at wide receiver.
Yeah, so that I think is a pretty big change in how the Titans will be run going forward. It'll have some effects on the 2025 season, but we'll really see that start to take effect as we get multiple free agency classes and multiple draft classes in this organization. Obviously, there was a huge change at one of the coordinator positions, and I think I don't want to say it went under the radar because Titans fans definitely reacted to it, but I don't know if it's really being acknowledged as the difference maker that it could be. Titans hired John Fassel as the new special teams coordinator, and I don't think that there could be a starker contrast between the experience and competency of the special teams coordinator last year and what they're getting with Bones Fassel, because Fassel is highly regarded as one of the best special teams coaches out there. One of the best special teams coordinators that a team could have is Bones Fassel. And last year, the Titans had a historically bad special teams unit. They were, constantly giving up punt returns, kick returns. I think of the Detroit game, specifically where they're just the defensive yardage allowed looked great, but it was because the Lions started almost every drive basically in the red zone because of how many return yards they were able to get and also the 4 turnovers the Titans had on the day, or maybe it was more than 4. But the point is, the special teams, I think, is going to go from being a disaster in 2024 to, if they can, we've said this about many position groups, if they can just get to league average, it's a huge win. But with Bones Fassel, I feel confident that they can get to an above league average point where special teams is actually a strength that is finding the team hidden yards and doing the stuff that Mike Vrabel always used to talk about. I don't think we can overstate enough how big of a change having I want to call him a real special teams coordinator is going to be for this team.
It's a massive addition. You're right. I mean, Colt Anderson last year just totally in over his head. Didn't do a good job. I think there were other mistakes made. I don't think he's fully culpable. I think there was roster errors made by Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan, an inexperienced duo, kind of setting a 53-man roster for the first time. We've talked about that, not keeping guys like Hassan Haskins and other good special teams players, Matthew Jackson, another guy they cut, keeping guys who didn't help them at all, like, a fourth tight end and David Martin Robinson, yada, yada. But Ultimately, as a coordinator, you are held responsible, and I don't think Colt Anderson did a good job. Multiple times where he got up there and said some really terribly stupid things in his press conferences that didn't help his public image or perception. Yes, this is a massive change. Again, one of the best, if not the best, special teams coordinator in football, in John Bones Fossil.
And while we're talking staff changes, there's been a handful of position coach changes here, but I think I want to highlight two big ones. Tony Oden was brought in as the cornerbacks coach / defensive pass game coordinator. That role was previously held by Chris Harris. There's not a whole lot to talk about with him, but the big one to me is they have hired a coach on the staff whose sole title, there's no hyphen in his name. He's not handling anything else. They brought in somebody to be the defensive run game coordinator in Travis Smith. And, full disclosure, I don't know anything about Travis Smith, but I do think it's very telling that they brought in a defensive run game coordinator when they didn't have that position on staff last season. They had a defensive pass game coordinator. Obviously, Denard Wilson was a defensive back. He was a defensive backs coach. He had been a defensive pass game coordinator, and last season with the Titans was his first year as a defensive coordinator overseeing the entire defense. And the Titans' run defense last year was pretty bad. It was pretty porous. They had a lot of problems with it. And so they bring in a defensive run game coordinator. I'm sure Denard Wilson understands what went wrong from a run stopping standpoint. Personnel obviously plays a factor in that as well. But hiring somebody whose sole job it is to focus on how the team can be better at stopping the run, I think speaks to some of the self-scouting that this team did in the offseason and realizing we need more help at this position.
I'll say this, it can't hurt, but I do think the majority of the blame does fall on personnel. I thought the run defense started okay during the year, especially when they had Ernest Jones in the lineup.
Yeah.
Now, when they traded him, and first of all, Kenneth Murray is not a good run defender, has never been a good run defender, so he was always a liability in the lineup. Then when you trade Ernest Jones, who's a really good run defender, and you replace him with, down the stretch, you had, Jerome Baker came in for him, was a huge downgrade. You bring in, you're playing Cedric Gray and James Williams late in the year, rookies who are totally green and inexperienced. I think personnel was the biggest reason they struggled as a run defense this year. Or last year. I don't think a run game coordinator is going to solely solve that, right? They need to get good linebacker play this year. And that's a big TBD, based on the makeup of that room right now. But as a D-line as well, when you've got Devondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons up the middle, and guys like, Keandre Coburn and Sebastian Joseph Day who could chip in, you hope that the D-line will carry a lot of the weight as a run-stopping group. But ultimately, the linebackers are going to have to take a ton of responsibility for what that unit looks like this year.
Yeah, so we don't know 100% if it will be better, but let's take a pin in that run defense conversation because we're going to come back to it when we talk about more philosophical changes.
That's what I really want to talk about. We're taking a lot of time to get to the changes I'm most excited to talk about. And that's something Nick Holt said. I'm not going to spoil, but something Nick Holt said about the offensive playbook and also some of the changes at edge. Those are the ones that really strike me as interesting.
Oh, yeah, and I'm glad you teased it because we're going to get into personnel here, and we're going to quickly get through this because we mentioned how we're not really going to talk much about the new quarterback position, but I do think it's worth pointing out. Last year, the Washington Commanders led the NFL in roster turnover with 63% new players on their 2024 team who weren't on their 2023 team. And we've talked a lot about, can Cam Ward have a Jaden Daniels effect here in Tennessee? And obviously, Jaden Daniels was a huge piece of the Commanders' turnaround, but so was 63% roster turnover. Well, the Titans right now, as it stands, they have 91 players on the roster. They have a exemption for Thomas Odukoya still, so they're at 91 instead of 90. 51% of those guys were not on the roster last season, and we're still at 91, right? That means 38 players have to be cut to get down to 53 players when the roster deadline cut day comes, whatever. That roster turnover number could increase if some of those 38 players that get cut were on the team last year. So right now, 51% roster turnover, that's a massive number, and we will be tracking that, after the final roster comes out, what the final roster turnover number was. I think that's a huge thing for this team to sort of restart and reboot and forget last year ever existed. Of those new players, 6 starters are new on offense. I am counting J.C. Latham as new because they have a new starting right tackle technically.
I
So
wouldn't
5
count
new
J.C.
players.
Latham is new.
5 new players, 6 new positions. Starters at 6 positions on offense are changing, and on defense, 4 positions. Starters at 4 positions are changing. So that's a pretty big turnaround. 10 out of 22 guys, really 9, sure, out of 22 guys are new on both sides of the ball. They have a new kicker and a new punter. So a huge amount of roster turnover.
Yeah, I'll say this. I mean, I don't know that the number will increase after cutdown day because a lot of UDFAs make up that number and most of them will be cut. So, but either way, it is going to be fairly notable. As you said, 9 out of 22 starters are new. About half of the offense. I mean, the offense obviously needed the most change based on how terrible it was. A new quarterback. Pretty much all new wide receivers, right? Minus Calvin Ridley's back. The tight end room looks fairly similar, as it should. It wasn't really a liability last year. 2 new starters on the offensive line. That's really important with, bringing in Kevin Zeitler and Dan Moore. You expect that unit to be a lot better. You expect the receivers to, potentially be better based on what it was last year. A lot of turnover, a lot of questions, but 52 odd percent turnover rate right now I counted that myself. So fairly accurate. I don't know if it's 100% accurate, but fairly accurate, I imagine. I went through all the free agents. I just went down the whole roster list and said new, and then I divided the number and came up with about 52%. So fairly different. Curious to see where that final number ends up. I don't know. I'm going to guess it's going to be anywhere from 45 to 55% once they finalize the initial 53.
Yeah, I agree. And before we get to the philosophy stuff here, which I think, as you said, is the most interesting stuff we're going to talk about, is there a position group on the Titans roster where they are right now that you expect to be worse than the December 2024 version of that group?
I mean, when you bring up December, I don't know if that's fair because you got a lot of guys on IR, a lot of guys.
Well, I don't want to account for like Ernest Jones being traded midseason,
right,
and like stuff like that,
right,
or the
right.
quarterbacks, what you
That's
expected the quarterbacks to be. Maybe corner.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think corner should be worse because even if you factor December, it's Roger McCreary, Jarvis Brownlee, and Darrell Baker. It might literally be the same trio, but I will say it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. If that's the trio, it's not going to be good. So I do want to say that. I don't want to sound like too much of a homerism fan kind of thing here because that room would not be good if that's what it is. I guess the big question, the most important one is at wide receiver because last December, you had Nick Westbrook-Akine going crazy, scoring touchdowns, and you still had Calvin Ridley. It really depends on what the rookies give you because it's such a big unknown, and it depends on what Tyler Lockett gives you. So I think wide receiver is exciting, but has a chance to be worse because we're really projecting that room outside of Calvin Ridley. But everything else, no, I would say is probably a surefire that it's better than it was.
Edge is an interesting one because Harold Landry's obviously gone.
One. Yeah.
But if Femi Oladejo and Draymond Jones and Lorenzo Carter can rotate to give you something that replaces Landry's production, it could be better. And again, we're going to get to that almost right now on why they have this new look edge room. But before that, we're going to talk about the offensive philosophy. But before that, Justin, we're going to do I'll Drink to That, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville. And what I'm drinking to today, Justin, is actually Sinkers' 40th birthday jamboree on Saturday, August 9th. Now, hear me out. You are going to want to attend this. It is at the Basement East. There's going to be 3 bands playing with music starting at 6 p.m. Tons of free stuff. Tickets are only $10, and that $10 is really a donation because all proceeds go to benefiting the Martha K. O'Brien Center in East Nashville. You can purchase tickets at the link in the podcast description below. And your entry also gets you, your $10 ticket to get in, gets you 2 free drinks at the event, and it also gets you a raffle ticket to potentially, the winner will join the Sinkers Beverages team on a trip to Buffalo Trace to pick a very special single barrel of bourbon. You gotta be at this event. Get your tickets, podcast description, there's a link, only $10, and again, all proceeds go to benefit the Martha K. O'Brien Center. You do not want to miss this event.
Yeah, that sounds outstanding. Always love events like that get you out, get a good drink in your hand, some good live music. Sounds like a must attend.
Must attend, and very perfect for the city of Nashville. So that's what I'm drinking to today. Sinkers Beverages, check them out. Again, link in the podcast description. They're also on Uber Eats. Justin, I've been really mentioning this hard because I feel like nobody wants to go anywhere anymore. It's easier. Like Jessica and I, we've been doing grocery shopping. We've just been ordering them and having them delivered to our door, so we don't have to find time in our busy week to actually go to the grocery store. Sinkers Beverages is doing the same thing on Uber Eats, just delivering whatever drinks you need. You got a party coming up, but you don't have time to get to the store. Uber Eats, baby, makes things super easy. Okay, we can finally get to the part of the episode that we both were most looking forward to. Hopefully everyone stuck with us here, 20-something minutes into the podcast. Let's talk about some offensive philosophy changes here, because the Titans obviously, again, self-scouted a lot of what went wrong in 2024 to make those things not go wrong in 2025. And we are expecting this team to be a better team, but we're also expecting them to be a better coached team. And I think, there's been a handful of coaching changes that we already mentioned, but even for the guys that are not new, I think we expect them to be better this year because we think they will have learned something from what they did last year. And Brian Callahan even said that it's important not to just acknowledge things that went wrong, but to change those things. And I'm going to play a clip that's going to launch our conversation here of Nick Holtz discussing some of the philosophical changes on the offensive side of the ball.
Last year, we're all new, we're all working together. A lot of us hadn't worked together before in our current roles. So now you look at how we install the offense, how we script practice, how we even game plan certain plays. We all know what we're looking for, the same things. And then in each position room, we can all explain it the same. So I think the communication has just been better, and it helps everybody just kind of, there's no gray area. I think we've taken a lot of stuff out of the offense. We took, there were plays from Cincinnati and plays that I brought and everybody else brought, and we're like, okay, that didn't fit. Or we repped them a bunch last year, and now we've taken them out. And that's helped, I think, streamline everybody, feel comfortable. We know how Brian calls a game now. All those kind of things have helped really the communication and then the information flow down to the players.
So there was a lot of words in there, and a lot of it is very interesting, but I think the most interesting is sort of a little throwaway comment of, we took a lot of stuff out of the playbook. That tells me that they've really evaluated what worked, what didn't, and does it all fit together as one cohesive system?
Yeah, that was the most interesting comment to me. I mean, look, we talked about it a little last offseason, but Brian Callahan, first-time head coach, Nick Holtz, first-time offensive coordinator. Again, I'm focusing on the offense, but Denard Wilson, obviously first-time D coordinator. But a lot of inexperience on the offense. And then you talk about the playbook. Look, every NFL team goes through changes to their playbook every offseason. But when you talk about Brian Callahan bringing plays over from Cincinnati, Nick Holtz bringing plays over probably from Jacksonville, where he was the passing game coordinator and had Calvin Ridley there. But it's a bit of a mismatch almost, right? Of opinions and plays, things of that nature. You get to really reflect on the year. Obviously, it was a really bad year, 3-14, worst record in the NFL. That's one of the things you're going to analyze and look over with a fine-tooth comb and make changes to. On top of that, we knew bringing in Cam Ward would bring changes to the playbook. We've talked about how much he loves switch verts, four verticals, Y cross, the RPO game, certain concepts. The Titans are probably going to implement more heavily into their playbook this year. So when you combine that with some self-scouting and say, hey, we were very inexperienced last year. Maybe we had too much in the playbook, or we had some things that worked for us well in previous stops but didn't work well for us here. I think you get, as Nick Holtz said, a better, more condensed version of a playbook that a coaching staff will feel is better streamlined.
Yeah, it's instead of being just a collection of all their favorite plays that they've run at various stops, it's a cohesive playbook that is all tailored to a specific philosophy and scheme with goals, with run game that marries to the pass game, and things that are more cohesive, I think, is sort of a theme that we're going to talk about as we get onto the defensive side of the ball too. But sticking with offense, I think that this is a bigger deal than, like you said, a typical offseason, let's install some new plays and let's eliminate some old plays. Like, this is a real overhaul of how to be successful on offense, understanding Brian Callahan, having the experience of calling a game every week for 17 weeks in a season. Like, now they understand the installation process. what's actually going to filter its way onto game day versus just being a play that they install in the spring of 2024 and then never come back to. So I think there's a lot of good that can come out of this, and just being more experienced. I mean, every human can attest to when you've been on the job, whatever job you're doing right now, after 1 year of being on that job, wasn't it so much easier and more natural, and just everything makes so much more sense than day one of being on that job? And it applies to these guys in the coaching staff as well. And obviously Cam Ward is a huge change on offense. You mentioned that. But the offensive line, I really think this offensive line has a chance to be better than league average, which we haven't seen in Tennessee in a long time. And that's going to open up the playbook more too, because I really do think at some point last year, Brian Callahan realized, okay, I have a quarterback that I cannot trust to air it out for an entire game without making one or two crucial mistakes. And I don't have an offensive line that I can trust to allow my quarterback to sit in a pocket and pick teams apart. So the Titans leaned into this really run-heavy approach, trying to hide their quarterbacks, especially when Mason Rudolph was in the game. Just like, don't let the quarterback be in a position where he can make a crucial mistake. Let's just ground and pound our way to possess the ball and see if we can get 3 points on the board on every drive here. And every once in a while, maybe we'll make it to the end zone. I really think that they, like halfway through the season last year, had to make a shift like that. So I'm excited to see now that Brian Callahan has a quarterback that he handpicked and an offensive line, hopefully, we don't know for sure, but hopefully that will be at least around league average. If his philosophy changes and if the Titans do become what we expected when Callahan was hired, which is a more pass-heavy team. Remember, his Bengals teams were passing, over 60% of their plays were passing. I think the Titans last year were like 50-something% run. So they were more run-heavy, and that's like way above league average. So I am interested to see, is that what Brian Callahan really wants to do, what happened last year, or was he forced to do that because of the personnel?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that personnel had a huge impact on how the Titans had to call plays down the stretch last year. Like, I talked about it when Mike Vrabel was here, and people thought it wasn't popular, but the same thing happened to Brian Callahan. When, A, you don't have an offensive line that can pass protect, and B, Callahan's issue was even worse because you don't have a quarterback you can trust in the drop-back passing game. You've got to run the football more, and you got to put essentially training wheels on the entire offense because you can't protect the ball and you can't protect the quarterback. So, of course, that grossly limits what you can do from an offensive playbook perspective. And yeah, certainly bringing in Cam Ward and what appears to be an improved offensive line should have a drastic impact on the way the Titans call games.
Okay, let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball now, Justin. I said we're going to stick a pin in the run defense conversation. There has been a philosophical shift. Obviously, we talked a lot at the top of the show about the scouting and what type of players they're looking for. But more specific than that, at defensive end, at that edge rusher spot, they have a new philosophy in what they want. And before we talk about it, again, let's listen to Brian Callahan sort of describe what they've been looking for at the edge position.
I feel good about the players we added. I think the dimensions of the outside linebacker position, I think we're bigger and stouter and stronger at the spot, just body type wise. I think that's by design as well. We'll see if we're better than we were a year ago. But I do like the players we've added. I'm excited about what they could bring for us. We're definitely at the edges a more physical looking group from top to bottom. I think is really what the key part of that is depth wise too. They all fit the profile we're looking for. So.
Two keys there. This wasn't just about Harold Landry's contract was this amount of money and he's not worth it, and Draymond Jones is a player that's on the market that's been in a similar system to what Denard Wilson runs because they're from the Mike McDonald tree, who's now the head coach in Seattle. This was he said that was by design, and he said players that fit the profile we're looking for. So this was a conscious effort, and I think this also has gone slightly under the radar. Paul Kaharski was on top of this, but he's the only one I've really seen talk in depth about this change, is that
I think
they have...
Glennon did too. I think Glennon might have written an article. I know Paul did, but I just wanted to point that out quickly.
Okay, good shout out there. But as far as like a broader discussion in Titans media about changes we're going to see this season, this is a pretty massive one because Harold Landry was one of the longest tenured Titans. He's been their sack leader how many years in a row? Number of years in a row he's been their sack leader. He was one of the guys that was sort of like a face of the defense alongside Jeffrey Simmons, and the Titans said he doesn't fit what this version of the Titans wants to be at the edge position. They wanted to get bigger at that spot, and they did so. And I think that part of this has to do with run defense and ability to set the edge, but it also has to do with what's kind of a larger shift in the NFL defensive landscape about what really works when pressuring a quarterback. And it seems that this staff believes the best and most effective way to rush the quarterback isn't necessarily for a defensive end to beat his tackle one-on-one off the edge with speed. It's to have everybody involved in the pass rush collapsing the pocket and condensing the pocket. And some of the best quarterbacks in league history in terms of their pocket presence and ability to maneuver in tight spaces, like Tom Brady, for example, his number one kryptonite was always that interior pocket collapsing pressure where there are no escape lanes and there isn't anywhere to move subtly in the pocket when it gets collapsed like that. And in order to have a team that can do that, you need big, strong guys at the edge position. And everyone they brought in at that spot, from Lorenzo Carter to Draymond Jones to Femi Oladejo, fit this bigger bodied profile. I mean, you've seen the pictures of Femi. This guy just looks like a tank. He's just huge, intimidating looking presence. And I think that, again, Brian Callahan said, that was by design.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a positive and a negative on here. And I don't know if I'm too early, but I will say on the positive side, I think NFL fans generally have a misconception that the league doesn't agree with. We all love speed at the edge position. Again, it's sexy, to be honest, right? Like, we love seeing a guy burst off the line of scrimmage, beat a tackle the way Harold Landry would. And there's obviously pathways to a lot of success doing it that way. There's also a lot of fast edge rushers who are terrible, right? Like, It's just, sometimes you're a one-trick pony or you lack the technical aspects of playing the position. I do think, generally speaking, NFL teams prefer power at that spot. And it's really tough to compensate for power as an NFL offensive lineman, whereas there are different ways and things you could do to compensate for speed, I think, when you're facing speed off the edge versus power. I do think that's true, and I think the Titans have made a coordinated effort to get bigger and stronger. I'll cut myself a little short because I've got more to say. I know you're going to play a clip or two. Where I do think I'll be a little negative is I don't know if the Titans are better at that position, and I don't know if it's going to lead to results. Like Brian Callahan said in that clip himself, we'll see if we're going to be better. Like, he knows that's a TBD. It's great to get, bigger, stronger, tougher. I don't know if the Titans got better, right? Like Draymond Jones, cut from his contract from Seattle, disappointing. Lorenzo Carter, 0 sacks last year. Femi Oladejo, second-round guy who's a bit raw at playing the position. So, yes, it's fine and dandy that they've gone over this philosophical change. I don't know that they got better, and that's the big TBD, and we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the new group of guys, Femi Oladejo is 6'3", 259. He's the closest one to Harold Landry, but Draymond Jones is 6'3".
And sorry, but I wanted to point out that was also his combine weight. But there's a good chance he weighs a bit more than that, right? Guys typically slim down for the combine to move around better. But if I had to guess, 263, 264 kind of thing. With Draymond Jones, you're going to play a clip where Draymond Jones says something about his weight and Lorenzo Carter's weight. You're about to read a listed weight. I never know how accurate that thing is. I'm going to put more stock in what Draymond Jones actually said at that minicamp clip.
Well, the listed weights for Draymond Jones, 6'3", 281. Huge dude. Lorenzo Carter, 6'5", 265. Harold Landry was 6'2", 252. So definitely was the smallest guy. Arden Key, obviously still in the mix. He's going to be their change-up speed rusher guy. But even he's 6'5". He's only 240. But 6'5" is the tall,
There's no
matches
way
Lorenzo
he's
Carter.
240 though, right? Like, he's got to be 248, 249, I imagine. He doesn't look 240.
Yeah, I agree. But let's listen to Draymond Jones, because Paul Kuharsky, again, the guy who was on top of this, I guess, alongside John Glennon, but mostly Paul Kuharsky from what I saw, he asked Draymond Jones specifically after practice one day last week about the new look group and about getting bigger at this spot.
Anywhere between 260 and 270. So, we're bigger body guys out there.
What's that say about this team's defensive intentions?
We coming out here to F some people up. That's what we're doing. Put hands on people, get nasty, knock a B out.
Stop the run first and then?
All that's included. Stop the run, obviously. But, I'm coming here to F stuff up.
That's also the mindset. It's not just the physical appearance. It's the tenacity that they're going to play with.
Yeah, and that is why I hate listed weights. Like, he said 260, 270. There's no way he's 281. If I had to guess, he was around that when he was more of an interior guy. Remember, Seattle made him switch positions to outside edge. He has confirmed that's where he's playing in Tennessee, by the way. So I don't think he's 280, but he probably is like 265, 270. And as he said, Lorenzo Carter sort of in that same frame. And Femi Oladejo in that same. They're all three of them are 260, 270, which is all three bigger than Harold Landry was last year. And probably bigger than Jalen Harrell is, I imagine, as well. And bigger than Arden Key is. So, yes, the three biggest players at the position, the three heaviest, the three stoutest, are all off-season acquisitions. So, no doubt the Titans living by what they say here. Because, yes, they went out and got three guys that fit the profile. They're bigger, stronger, tougher, stouter on the edge. Are they better? TBD.
TBD, but they definitely want to be better when it comes to rushing the passer as well. Like, I think a big part of this was about stopping the run, but they need to be better rushing the passer. And there's a philosophical shift there as well. And this may be a little bit obvious, and it may leave us wondering why this wasn't more of an emphasis last season. But this season, they've said it multiple times. Denard Wilson has mentioned it. Brian Callahan has mentioned it. Some players have mentioned it. And it became mentioned so much that media members started asking about it to get more quotes on it. But this philosophical shift that they want to have a coordinated rush plan. They're not just going to have four guys if it's a standard four-man rush. They're not just going to have all four guys like, go do a move, go try to beat your guy. If you're double teamed, then try to beat both guys. If you're got a one-on-one, just try to win and get to the quarterback. No, they need to know that they all have a rush lane to cover. And by rush lane, I mean a lane that the quarterback could step up in the pocket and escape and scramble for yards, because the Titans were horrible at giving up scramble yards last year. They allowed way too many quarterbacks to escape sacks and get yards with their legs. And this year, they want to be much more coordinated on it. And Brian Callahan spoke about this at length and talked a little bit about the philosophy with having four guys be coordinated. So here's Callahan on the missed sacks that really hurt the defense last season.
It's more about just the finishing of the sacks. We had them wrapped up. It slips out. We don't come to balance. We don't do a good enough job technically to get themselves in position to bring a quarterback down. We missed, probably, I think somewhere in the range of 20 plus, when you're just looking at chances we had to get the quarterback on the ground that we didn't get. And obviously you convert those missed sacks into sacks, you're in a much better place than we ended up at the end of the year. So that's been a big point of emphasis for us. And a lot of that has to do with the balancing of the rush too, and making sure that we don't give quarterbacks lanes. So if we do miss one by somebody, the next part there is to clean up that next part of it.
So there you go. Balanced lanes, clean up, and all be coordinated. And Jeffrey Simmons spoke about this also, and I want to play that clip as well.
We have to do a better job, and we talked about it, and we've been talking about it since last year, and everything, even the individual, we're going through things and working through things together as a group, the whole up front. And you're talking about, all right, if this guy getting a slide, then we got to have the balance of rusher. We got that guy on the other side getting a one-on-one. The guys on the edge, they got one-on-one. So, we talk about the 4 points of the quarterback, back foot, front foot, upfield. And then I said when you rushing quarterbacks, most of the time it's four-man rushes. So we all got a back arm, we all got a point we have to get to. And, if we not at them points, eventually the quarterback escape. Pretty much everybody in our division that play quarterback can run. And when you not on the same page up front, you create them rush lanes and you create explosive downfield. So quarterback's able to step up. So at the end of the day, it's four guys rushing. We have to be on the same page, make sure that there's no escape lanes, and no matter if we got a game or not, we all got to be on the same page.
Yeah, I'm going to chime in real quick if you don't mind. I think all of that obviously makes sense. Where I'm going to be, I don't want to say negative, but it's like you're talking about missed sacks. Like I probably combed through the tape of all 32 teams last year and calculate 15 to 20 missed sacks, right? Everyone misses sacks. Now, when you're the Titans and you finish third lowest in sacks in the NFL last year, they only had 32 sacks. That was third lowest in the entire league. Then yeah, you're going to put even more emphasis on it, right? Because it was a real problem for you, and you've got to improve those numbers. And yes, you got to do that through coordinated rush plans, having all four guys on the same page. Collapsing the pocket was part of the strategy last year. It's why they drafted Tavondre Sweat. You got the same two guys up the middle this year. Obviously, it didn't fully work last year because the results weren't good enough. You bring in some new guys on the edge. You get stouter, bigger, yada, yada, everything we talked about. Did you get better? We don't know. The missed sacks thing, I'm bullish on it because everyone misses sacks. You can go through the tape of all 32 and probably count 10, 15, 20 missed sacks every single year. They've got to be better at it, and they've got to win. It's not just, yes, the coordinated's going to help, but you've got to win some matchups as well. You got to win one-on-ones in the NFL. So can they do that? We'll see.
Well, I think that that's why the coordinated part is so important for this team specifically, because this team is going to have to be a sacks by committee type of team.
Yes.
They don't have a 15 sack guy, a Myles Garrett, a TJ Watt. They don't even have a 10 sack guy. They don't have Harold Landry anymore. They might have 4 guys who get 6 sacks each, right? Or they might have 2 or 3 guys that get 8 or 9 sacks each, like they did the one year when Danico
Jeffrey
Autry
Simmons is capable, and they needs to have 7, 8 sacks type of year.
Absolutely. And Tavondre Sweat's, talked a lot about how the emphasis for him, from the coaching staff when they had their end of season meeting, go off into the offseason, the big emphasis for him was, we need you more in the pass rush. You've been a good run stopper. We need you more in the pass rush. So they need that from him. They need Draymond Jones to come in and have one of his best seasons as a guy rushing the passer. They need Lorenzo Carter to rotate in and give them a handful of sacks, and some pressures that lead to other guys, like Brian Callahan said, coming in and cleaning up and getting a sack. Like, they can't have a 0 sack season from Lorenzo Carter like he had last year. And most of all, we talked about this on the mini pod we did yesterday. We talked about this last week. They need Femi Oladejo to be a dude pretty quickly. So this is going to be a pass rush by committee. And I think, we're not going to talk about this very much until January, but next year, the Titans are going to have 2 needs that I think we can almost identify already: edge and receiver. They need premier talent at those 2 spots. And we'll see if any of the... Well, yeah. Well, I mean, yes, cornerback as well, unless L'Jarius Sneed comes back to life, and if they re-sign Roger McCreary, and if Jarvis Brownlee Jr. can prove to be a guy. But I think where they really need premier talent is wide receiver and edge. And, maybe there's a chance that Alec Ayamaner is Puka Nacua, and maybe there's a chance that Chimere Dike is Amon-Ra St. Brown, 2 day 3 guys that were instant contributors and are now top 10 receivers in the NFL. That's a pretty big long shot, so I'm not banking on that at all. Hopefully you get something out of those guys and they don't prove to be total busts. I mean, these are day 3 picks we're talking about. As excited as we are for them, they're still day 3 picks, right? So we can't put our expectations too high for what those guys can give you. They're going to need a premier receiver and a premier edge rusher, and I think those are going to be the biggest needs heading into the 2026 season. So for now, let's see what they can get out of this edge group without a premier edge rusher, because that'll be the next step to taking them towards, from maybe they can compete for the division to, okay, this team could compete for a Super Bowl. That's a big difference in where they are now and where they want to get to. And this team, I think they believe they can compete for a wild card spot or for that division. It is a weak division. I think fans have more tempered expectations and understand that this might be a 2-year rebuild before they're really in playoff talks. But if they want to achieve their goals this year, they're going to need the pass rush to be, like you said, way better than it was last year. And having them do it by committee, where they are coordinated and they understand where everyone else is and how to eliminate those QB rush lanes, is going to be a massive factor in making it all work. So there you have it, Justin. Those are the biggest changes from the 2024 Titans to the 2025 Titans. We didn't talk too much about personnel. We hit it a little bit, but I mean, 2 out of 3 starting receivers are different. Both inside linebackers starting are going to be different. You got a new safety, you got a new left tackle, you got a new right guard. There's a ton of changes, but I think the philosophical changes and the lessons that this coaching staff learned from a failure of a season are bigger than anything that when it comes to players actually on the field, aside from the one guy we didn't spend a lot of time talking about. If Cam Ward is as good as we all hope he can be, then this team can be a lot better than we expect. If Cam Ward needs a year of seasoning to really, just take his lumps as a rookie, if he has a Caleb Williams style year, this team will show improvement, but they won't make the playoffs. If he has a Jaden Daniels style year, then this team is going to compete for a playoff spot. He's the biggest factor and the biggest change, but I think we covered the rest of them pretty well. Any final thoughts on changes to this team before we sign it off?
No, this has been a really long, supersized episode. I thought the philosophical changes on offense, what Nick Cole said about the playbook, and then the defensive line specifically, the coordinated stuff, and then getting bigger, stronger at edge. Those 2 philosophical changes are really, really intriguing to me. Like you said, stick a pin in it. We'll assess the results when we have them.
Yeah, so thanks again to everyone for tuning in. Remember to hit subscribe, like this video, drop a comment below. What do you think are the biggest changes? Do you like the mini-sode pods that Justin and I have put out this week? And also check out Justin's new article over on titansize.com projecting the 53-man roster. We're going to do that at some point on this podcast. Personally, Justin, you tell me how you feel, because I know you just put an article out about it. I want to wait till we see some preseason reps and see how, which guys are playing when, who's playing the whole fourth quarter of these games that we know probably means they won't make the team, who's being sat after one series. Like, before I start projecting the 53-man roster, I want to see that stuff. But I appreciate that you attempted to do it now with the limited information that we actually have.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun doing it. I think I'm going 53 for 53 personally, even though it's way too early projection. And I went on radio to talk about it, so check that out. I was on 3HL this afternoon on 104.5 The Zone. I had a lot of fun doing that with the crew over at 3HL, one of the best shows in the Nashville market. I was really glad that they brought me on to talk about that 53-man roster projection. Head over to titansize.com and check it out.
Yeah, all right, that'll do it for this one. Thanks again to Sinkers Beverages. Remember to get your tickets to Sinkers' 40th birthday party. With the link to do so is in the podcast description, only $10 there. So check that out as well. And until next week, we won't have another pod out this week. So until next week, y'all stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.